backwards, of course, as it's a mirror image on this stick. The font of type is in this, a case. It contains the upper and lower cases, capital letters and little letters. The capital letters are arranged alphabetically. The lowercase letters are arranged according to usage. Right in the middle where you want them, or you have your most used letters. And that gives rise to the expression to mind your P's and Q's. Because when you're working backwards, a P and a Q would look the same, so that's why you have to be careful. Print compositors, obviously, because they were working to very hard deadlines, producing papers overnight, were known for their speed. Book compositors had to be quite learned and bookish, obviously, so as they weren't fazed by words like coruscate and hippopotamus. The faster you composed, the more you were paid. Newspaper compositors could do over 2,000 letters an hour, for which they were paid 25 shillings. For each mistake you made, though, you were fined 1 whole shilling. Thank you very much. Next, all the composed letters were bound together in a frame and wedged tightly into place before being taken to the press. At the beginning of the 19th century, presses were made of iron and were worked by hand. But as the years wore on and printing businesses like Smales flourished, it was time to invest in some brand new technology.
Like all industry in the mid-19th century, power-driven was the thing, and printing was no exception. Friedrich Koenig, a German, invented the first power press. What is it with Germans and presses? This is a Wharfdale from 1863 and embodies the same principles. The form passes underneath on the bed, backwards and forwards, in the same way as a hand press, but the paper goes on a cylinder. It's a cylinder press. It's much, much quicker.
These steam-powered presses were entirely automatic, except for feeding the paper in.
And the next stage was electrically powered presses, like this Heidelberg. Engage the drive. One of the very cunning things about this press is that down there is a suction pump, so we no longer have to feed the paper by hand. But the most exciting thing is this has a variable drive. So if I wind this handle, it can speed up.
Heidelbergs were so effective that some British newspapers were still being printed on them in the 1980s. German efficiency. But these fast mechanical presses showed up just how slow composing was, and it took a bit of German know-how to solve that problem as well.
This marvellous contraption is a linotype machine. It was invented in 1879 by a man rejoicing in the name of Ottmar Mergenthaler, and it was he who finally solved the problem of making a compositing machine.
At the top of the linotype is a bank of matrices. Brass moulds for casting letters of type. They fall down into the machine when you type the letters you want on the keyboard. Then, pushing this lever sets off the casting process. Inside, hot lead is poured into the moulds, allowed to cool and spat out at the bottom as a slug of type.
The story goes that he was demonstrating it to an American press baron called Whitelaw Reid. Mergenthaler pressed the keys on the machine, and when the slug came out, Reid apparently said, "Ottmar, you said a linotype," and the name stuck.
Printing was now much quicker and easier, but still books and newspapers had to be made available to ordinary people like you and me.
Better printing technology meant more books, more knowledge, but not everybody could afford to purchase those books. Great men had always had great libraries, but this became the era of the public library. Like this, the Mitchell Library in Glasgow. Clearly, one of the best things about being British.
In 1800, there were no public libraries in Britain, but by 1900, there were 295, crammed with books on ever more varied subjects.
The Pleasures of the Table by Sir Francis Colchester Wemyss. Dedicated to those charming young people of Cheltenham Ladies' College, whose amiable reception in November 1929 of a disquisition on housekeeping by an elderly gentleman set a ball rolling which has reached its goal in this book.
But all that printing required a great deal of paper, and hand-making it all just wouldn't do. Something else was required.
Ever wondered where your recycled paper goes?
This is Apsley Mill in Hertfordshire. It's an industrial paper factory, and amazingly, it was first mechanised in 1803.
Here at Apsley Mill, they use recycled paper. So the first stage of the process is feeding that into this machine to turn it into crumb. It's basically what happens when you leave a paper tissue in your jeans and put it through the washing machine. Oh, a paper cut. This is crumble. The recycled paper and rags have been mashed up. It's really hot. It actually starts to ferment after a while, because what it needs to do is go in here, into the beater. Exactly the same design as the beater at Wookey Hole at the handmade paper mill. But here at Apsley, it's doing a much beefier job.
Bin after bin of crumble is added to the beater, and when the mixture is the right consistency, it's siphoned off into a tank.
After the beater, the pulp is further diluted, passed into this tank. We need this huge amount of stock because we're not going to make nice sheets of handmade paper. We're going to feed a machine with a very, very bad pulp habit.
This is the paper-making monster. It's a Fondrinier.
Designed by a Frenchman, funnily enough, and it's about to start making paper. It's a bit like being in a foundry before you pour hot metal. You've got tons and tons and tons of that pulp, and this great big machine that's just very excited. They're about to start it off, and when they do, the paper making will be continuous, so everything has to be just right.
It's a tense moment. The paper pulp has to be fed onto the conveyor, called a decal, and passed through the rollers at exactly the right rate, or else the whole batch is ruined.
Paper by hand, you lower the decal into the pulp. Here, it's fed by nozzles onto the decal. On the handmade process, you put it on felt. Same here, felt. Felt rollers though, because this is continuous. Then it's fed onto these rollers. These great big rollers are steam heated, boiling hot. It goes over and under, so it dries each face, the front and the back face. And there are 18 of these rollers.
The rollers remove the excess water, producing 72,000 square feet of finished paper an hour.
Here we are. That's the 18th roller. The paper is now hard, but to compress it and give it a glaze, it goes through these final rollers that are actually compressing it. They're also adding a glaze through that water trough. It's then checked by this X-ray machine. Didn't have that in 1803 when this machine was invented. And finally, look, a roll of paper. The brilliant thing about paper is it's such a basic recipe, pulp plus water, so you can vary it endlessly. Blotting paper, brown paper, cartridge paper, watercolour paper, wallpaper. Wallpaper, in fact, was invented in 1804, 1 year after this mill was founded. And then, if you want to add something to the mix, you can. Perhaps some paper with elephant poo in it. Seriously.
Industrial papermaking made all sorts of mass-production paper products possible. After all, you wouldn't cover your walls in your house with handmade paper from Wookey Hole, would you?
Almost all the paper made at Apsley Mill comes from recycled products, which is a good thing, because nowadays most paper is made from wood pulp, which is a bad thing.
Our passion for print can take its toll on the environment unless we watch it. So rather than just churning out more and more regardless of what the consequences are, perhaps we should take a leaf out of Baskerville's book and think about quality, not quantity, and take a bit more care.